According to a Harvard Business School professor, almost 30,000 new products are introduced each year, and 95% of them fail.
Daddy wasn't finding a bow wow. Daddy wasn't finding a bow wow. I love my little cat. I'm very fond of that. I'd rather have a big bow wow 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 wow. Daddy
Hello,
wasn't
and welcome to the
finding a
Mochiverse. I'm
bow
Linette.
wow.
And I'm Skip.
Hello. So today I think we have a treat for you. Hopefully you'll feel the same. It's kind of another double feature. But these two things are very closely related. Today we're going to touch on some inventions or products that never quite made it to the market. But we're also going to talk about some inventions and products that totally were a thing, either couldn't quite make it to the mainstream or were huge for their time and just faded away into history. So fads and flops, basically. So a lot of this is going to take place, at least the first part, in the Victorian era. And then we're going to go a little bit into not our century anymore, I guess, but the last century and talk about some of the stuff that somebody thought was a great idea. But I don't know. Sometimes I wonder, Dad, what marketing people are thinking.
Well, I think that myself sometimes. It's always interesting. You see a store or something go up in an area where you go, man, I don't know what they're thinking, because first off, nobody would be able to stop to get in there because it's so inconvenient to get in there. And most of the time, the traffic is they're just driving by.
Right. It's like there was an episode of that show, the Jerry Seinfeld show, the comedians in cars with coffee, where he was in Portland and they were talking about, like, in Portland you could have a store that just sells very specific like spoons. And it would be great for years. It's just a good place to have that sort of thing. But yeah.
Well, yeah, it's amazing. I think this is right. A lot of times I don't know what people are thinking. It's like down here, we're always commenting about there's a car wash in every block, but there's no place to have no restaurants, so.
Right, exactly. But yet in Massachusetts, they still managed to have like 34 Dunkin' Donuts in a single square block. So
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, they're always busy, whatever one you go to.
well, they are,
Uh,
because I don't know. See, this is something that baffles people who aren't from Massachusetts, but it is very important which Dunkin' Donuts
oh yeah,
you go to. I mean, there's one, like, you can have a Dunkin' Donuts right here, and then you can have another one across the street. That one sucks, the one across the street.
Yep.
The one that I go to, and like we talked about before, a lot of it has to do with right and left turns too.
Oh yeah,
like
oh
like the
absolutely.
gas stations. Some people find it hard to believe that, like, in Massachusetts, you'll have two gas stations across the street with very different prices, and people will pay the higher price if they only have to take a right-hand turn into the gas station. If you have to take a left-hand turn, it could be like 5 cents a gallon, and people are like, screw that, I'm not doing it.
But it isn't just the left-hand turn going in; it's a left-hand turn coming out.
That's
So
true. That's true. Or if
yeah,
there's like a punishment light that's like, it's green for 2 seconds and then it's red for like 3.5 minutes.
yep,
Yeah, it's important.
very important.
The Victorian era. You remember that, right, Dad?
Oh yeah, when I used to take my horse and buggy
Yeah.
to go to the grocery store. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, when you and your buddy Queen Victoria, you remember that.
Yeah,
The Victorian era. So basically this time period in the mid to late 1800s was like there was an explosion of innovation because there were hundreds of useful inventions, concepts, because they were just coming into, like, electricity being a thing. Mechanization in factories was like huge, because then suddenly you could have so much more. I almost just said profit, but obviously that's the case. But you could have so much more done in such a little time with less people, slightly less children, being employed for these tasks.
yep.
But I mean, listen, when I was in elementary school, the first thing they told us, we didn't even know what it was, but they're like, the invention of the cotton gin. Like, we were like, okay, what does that mean? But it was like a really big, important invention, because it took away the need for so much manual labor separating the cotton from the plant and separating the seeds and everything, that it like, it caused a boom in manufacturing, and that happened across every aspect. But yeah, electricity was a huge thing. Electricity that brought power into homes, which of course was super dangerous, but that's a whole other episode. People could now have devices in their home that could make their work easier. And so you see a lot of these inventions of like, irons, that instead of just having an iron that you stuck on the stove to heat up, you could actually plug it into a socket. And unfortunately, they plugged it into the same socket that their lights were plugged in, just in the middle of the ceiling. I remember watching a documentary on Victorian inventions, and they had like, when the electricity thing was first happening, they had everything electric. They were just making everything electric. And they had an
Okay.
electric tablecloth. So it was basically your tablecloth had just like wires in it. And you could put like a lamp in the middle of your table and plug it into your tablecloth. And also like chafing dishes that you could plug into your tablecloth and have your dinner. But, like the minute you spill something on your tablecloth, now your house is on fire,
That's right. Yep.
just
Yep.
a slight problem. But yeah, so and so many inventors were trying to come up with ways to get into these markets, because it was like, oh, I got to get in on this train, And so of course, there were a lot of things that were successful, like vacuum cleaners and electric irons eventually, and blenders and things like that. But there were quite a lot of duds. So we're going to talk about some of those duds. There was an amazing amount of hats. This really struck me. If you go online and you just look at Victorian inventions hats, apparently, I guess hats weren't good enough just being hats. I know everybody had to wear hats in the 1800s. It was like a politeness thing. It was like a societal thing.
Yep.
But apparently just a hat wasn't good enough to be a hat. You had the umbrella hats, which are great. You had one hat that was a flotation device, which was really fun. If you ever get a chance to look at the drawings for the patent on that, it was basically just, a flotation device that was inside your hat, so that if, I don't know, somebody kicked you into the river, your hat would just explode. And then there was this sort of like floaty
Yeah.
you could grab onto. So the self-tipping hat is my favorite. So in the 1800s, it was customary to tip your hat to a person walking by, generally ladies, but I think they tipped their hats to everybody. It was just a form of greeting that you were supposed to do. And all you do when you tip your hat is basically put your hand up on your hat and lift it a little bit. And that was a form of acknowledgement, like saying, hey, what's up? I guess that's too hard. This one guy said, there's a real need for people to have a hat that tips itself, because it's just, what if you have a newspaper in your hand, and you can't tip your hat? So this device, it was really hard to describe. So it was kind of like a frame, a wooden or metal frame that like stuck on your head. And within that frame, there was this clockwork mechanism. It was like a little box that had all this clockwork stuff in it. And when you would bend over to bow, the mechanism would start working, because there was probably like a cord that ran from the hat all the way down your shirt to your back or something. Yeah. And the mechanism starts moving. It lifts up the hat just a little bit off your forehead while you were bowing. And then when you straightened up again, the mechanism would start working the other way, and the hat would come back down on your head. So like,
Why didn't it work?
Yeah, why didn't it work? I guess people were just like, I don't know, I just have a hat. I mean, hats were, because they were so important and because everybody had to have one, there were a lot of people who, their hat was their sort of prized possession. You took care of your hat, and you always had to have your hat. If you ever watched Back to the Future Part 3, when they went back to the 1800s,
yeah,
when Marty shows up at his like relative's house and he doesn't have a hat or boots, his ancestor is like really focused on the fact that he doesn't have a hat. Like, where would you be going without a hat? Why don't you have a hat? Like, it's disgraceful because he didn't have his hat. So I guess it was really important, but that was, I guess, apparently not enough. It was probably a budgetary thing, and also like, I don't know, it just seems way too complicated for a very simple thing, I suppose.
Well, not only that, the first thing that comes to my mind is that what if you have a gust of wind? What happens then?
What happens then? Like your whole hat cage just flies into someone's face, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
What if you bow too low?
Oh, yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah. It's obvious why
Yeah.
it didn't work. You can understand, somebody, I always joke about this. Somebody sit in a hot tub, just contemplating their navel. And all of a sudden these ideas come to them. So,
Yeah. Oh man, what if we had that hat?
yeah.
Um, this was one, it was called the baseball catcher. So, the catcher in baseball, he's pretty geared up anyways, right?
Yep. Mhm.
He's got that big mask on his face, so that, if a ball hits his face, but he's also got all that padding, you know. So this guy invented and tried to patent. I don't think it ever made it onto the market. This device that a catcher would wear. It was literally like a shark cage stuck to the front of him. It was this big, huge box that covered his face and his chest, and it had like a little funnel in the bottom with like a tube,
Yeah.
and it was open most of the time. So this guy has got this huge metal device on him, open, and he's got this padding on his chest. And so instead of, like, I don't know, trying to catch the ball, I guess he would just have his arms down at his side and like the ball would just hit him squarely in the chest, and then that would activate the cage to clamp closed, catch the ball, and then direct it into this funnel that would then fall through a tube, and then he could catch it out of the tube. So it looks ridiculous. It's very fun. I am going to be putting these links into the show notes so everybody can have a lot of fun with them. And the shoot, by the way, it ends like right by his crotch, which I know catchers are interested in having their hands by their crotch all the time, but they're doing signals. So
Yeah. Yeah.
they're like, hey, look at me.
Uh,
I don't know. I don't know much about sports, but I do observe that stuff every once in a while.
yeah. I don't think you'd want the ball hitting you in the chest, even if you got a cage around it.
Right? I mean, I've seen that these people who have like skull fractures from the ball hitting them in the head
Yeah.
while they have their helmet on. So
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd like that. There was a mustache guard, and it was made of metal. So you'd have the strap that goes around your head, just like, like safety glasses or like swimming goggles. And then it had this metal plate that would just hold your mustache up while you were eating so that you wouldn't get any, save it for later for your
That would have to be
mustache.
quite a mustache.
Well, back then they did have quite
Yeah.
interesting, they had the big, huge mustaches that extended out, the curly cues, and mustaches were very important during the Victorian era too. So they were made of like gold and silver. They're just like, why? And they look ridiculous, of course. They do have, if you work in a hospital, they do actually have, you know how you have to wear that cap over your head, the
Mhm.
little paper sort of cap.
Yep.
They have beard guards that you have to wear if you have a beard.
I've had to do that at some point. I can't remember when it was, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so, like, especially if you worked in the IV room, I had one friend who worked with me at the hospital who had to wear the beard guard, and he was like, yeah, whatever. Like,
Mhm.
it was pretty silly. But, it's either that or you had to shave your beard. So they chose that. This one was called, I don't know how it was pronounced, but the word looks like oxydonor. So OXYDONOR. This was like a medical device. And it looked like it was like a big metal capsule, about, I want to say, like two softballs next to each other, that size. And it had a cord coming from it, a big long cord. And then at the end of the cord, there was like a brass circle, kind of like those little things they put on your chest when you do like an EKG.
Mhm.
And you put that on your ankle, you lay down, and you take the cord, you take the capsule, and you put it in a bucket of water. And so what this was supposed to do was, it was supposed to take your body heat would travel through the cord into the thing, and somehow the water and your body heat would activate the action and it would cure everything that you might have going wrong with you. So they they got a lot of complaints from customers, saying it didn't do anything. And because most of the people complaining were also sufferers of tuberculosis, because most people were sufferers of tuberculosis in the Victorian era. The company then put out a statement that they never specifically said they could cure TB. So that's on you. This is during the time of patent medicines, when you didn't really have to be responsible for what you said your product would do on the cover. Just cure everything. I really love this one. And I think Richard says that I'm going to need this. It was an alarm clock. Okay. And this is how the alarm clock worked. You have your bed, and then you have your alarm clock, which is like behind your bed or on the wall. And attached to the alarm clock was this grid of 60 wooden blocks. So they were all like suspended from this grid. And when the alarm went off, the wooden blocks would just drop on your head.
Oh man.
That's just how you wake up in the morning. Now you've seen the videos. Richard likes to show them to me because apparently I'm not easy to wake up in the morning. Whatever. Because I use my snooze alarm. Whatever. There's this like bed that'll just like launch you out of bed, when the alarm goes off.
Mhm.
I know I had a hard time waking up when I was a kid. I always shut off my alarm and then you had to come and wake me up. But it was really funny because my alarm I would shut off or it wouldn't wake me up. But the sound of your foot touching the carpet right before you opened my door would wake me up.
Okay.
It was just like, nope, nope, he's not waking me up. He's not going to do it. I'm awake. I'm awake. I would just shoot out of bed. And we had the same problem with Bev. We tried to do that with Bev and she would always shut off her alarm. And so I'd have to go in and get her up. So we got her one of those alarm clocks that had the wheels on it.
Yeah.
If you snoozed it, you could snooze it once. But then if you snoozed it and then it went off again and you tried to snooze it again, the alarm would stay on and it would jump off the table on its wheels and then it would go in random patterns around the room and you had to get up and chase it to turn it off. So it cost like $50 and we were really pleased with ourselves when we bought it. The very first day she snoozed it and then it went off and it just landed in a pile of clothes next to her bed and it stayed there. So she was able to shut it off.
It's like one of the things that comes to my mind, well, maybe a good way of describing it would be Pavlov's dog. When I was in the basic training, one of the things in the morning, and you've seen it in movies where they TI or DI comes in banging things and get up, get out of that bed.
Like the trash can.
For me, for me, it was I was already awake, dressed in my bunk all made up when he did that because I wanted no part of that.
No, who wants to wake up that way?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Reveille, rise and shine. Yeah.
Yep.
I won't say the other part. I know what they used to say to you guys.
Yeah, I know.
Something about dropping something and grabbing something else.
Yeah,
yes.
There you go. Yeah.
Yes, we know.
Yeah. So that was my way of dealing with it. So I never had to worry about that.
Honestly, that works better than any alarm clock, I think.
Yep.
You just like spring awake at like whatever time. Well, Reveille was probably like 4 a.m, right? So you would like 5 minutes before 4, you were like, ah.
Yeah, whatever it was. I don't remember what it was, but whatever it was, I was always up and ready. So
that's really funny.
Yeah.
These are a lot of fun. I mean, if you go online, you could find millions of them. There was the anti-garroting cravat. Okay. So garroting, of course, is when you like strangle somebody with a cord. And they made this cravat that men could wear that had like spikes on it that would protect them against somebody coming up behind them with a rope and strangling them to death. I mean, somebody who tried to invent this or tried to market this really thought that was a big concern. I don't know how many people were just like jumped on the street on a regular basis and strangled to death, but I mean, maybe it was rough times. There were a few different inventions for corsets, but this one was kind of interesting. It was a corset that had it had inflatable boobs on it. And it literally, like, I looked at the drawings, it literally is just a corset with 2 big boobs that you could like make bigger or smaller, however it suited whatever you were wearing that day. Now, I think they were just a little behind the times because nowadays we have the wine bra, which I believe my sister had, but I don't want to slander her if it's not true. It's a bra that you could put wine in. And it's got a little straw coming out of it that you can like wear to like, like a football game. Bring your own wine. It's like the hat thing with the two beer cans, but a little more discreet. I saw once there's like the opposite thing, which you could wear on airplanes. And it was a urinal that you could wear on an airplane that was basically a small urinal that you would attach. And there's a tube that comes from it that runs down your leg to a bag. so that you don't have to get up during the flight to use the bathroom. But you're sitting with your pee on your leg the whole time in a bag. Like, hey, listen, if you have to have a medical device, that's something you need to get used to. But like, you're gonna do it on purpose on like a 2.5 hour flight, so you don't have to get up once.
I don't think so.
No,
That's why I call that a hard pass.
a hard pass. You've seen, of course, the golf club that you could pee into. I actually think I think somebody I knew had one of those. So it's a golf club, and it was hollow, and it had like a little loincloth on the end. And you're lit like the intention is that you don't have to go into the woods in your golf course and pee. That you're just gonna do that right there on the green and just hold your golf club in front of you and nobody will know because you've got like this loincloth over. Oh, yes, I'm peeing right now. Come on.
Uh,
You could solve that very easily by having bathrooms on golf courses, but I guess
no, that's not practical.
that's not practical. I mean, they got all those water hazards, just pee in those.
Well, yeah, but it depends on. I don't golf, so I don't know for sure. But
Yeah.
you got an 18-hole golf course. I don't think halfway through. Yeah, I don't think there's bathrooms halfway through. I could just see it having a porta potty halfway through.
Well, they spend so much money on a golf course, they could certainly put something nice there.
Yeah, I just don't think. I don't.
I don't understand golf anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry, all you golfers out there. I just don't understand. I mean, I'm not a sports person anyways, but I definitely don't understand golf.
What about the other big one?
Yeah, are we talking about the big bad one?
Yep.
Yeah, so there was radium.
Mhm.
And radium deserves its own episode. It deserves, well, the radium girls deserve their own episode. If you've never heard of the radium girls, it's incredibly sad and awful and terrible, but interesting. And if you have a morbid sensibility, you might hear us talking about that someday. But radium is a radioactive element, and it was discovered in the late 1800s by Marie Curie. Most people know who that is. She actually won 2 Nobel Prizes. And I think her husband won one, I think. She discovered this element and she realized pretty quickly, number one, it was dangerous. And number two, it would be really useful for a lot of medical things. The advent of radiation as a therapy for cancer came about right around this time. It wasn't necessarily from her, but because I think people were still they already kind of knew about it. But once it kind of caught the public's eye when she made this big discovery, it was around the time of patent medicines. And it was around the time of this craze where like we need a cure-all for everything. We don't want to go to the doctor. We don't want to have to, suffer with any kind of ailments. We don't want to have healthy practices, certainly. And we want to like try to live forever, or at least tell ourselves we're going to live forever. It's now called the wellness industry instead of patent medicine or quackery, but it certainly was very big in the late 1800s and early 1900s. So what happened with radium is that all of these companies went absolutely cuckoo over it. They started creating all these products to market to people because they had heard about the discovery of radium being promising for medical uses. So the biggest one was called Radithor, and it was basically bottled water with radium in it. And I was talking about this morning with Richard. It really reminds me of all the different waters that you can buy today. Some of them are touting, like water's great. I hate water, but water's great for you. I understand that. You and I have talked many times about my problem with water. But there's all these waters that are marketed to being like better than water, like, with the pH levels and with certain amounts of electrolytes in them or electrolytes taken out of them. I'm currently drinking one that has, it's called Hint, not a sponsor, that just has a tiny amount of flavor. Like I could totally just put some lemon or lime in my water, but I'm not doing that. I'm spending $2 for a bottle of literally water that has a tiny amount of flavor in it. But they touted this Radithor as like a cure-all for every disease. And they said it would invigorate you. And basically telling these people who had just heard of this element, this magical thing that emits energy, that they could then have the same energy in their bodies. And what's bad about energy? I mean, electricity was just coming out. People thought electricity was magic. And so they thought, well, radiation is even more magic. And if I can have all this glowing inside my body, that would be so fantastic. So they bought into this Radithor thing. And one particular guy, his name is Eben Byers, and he was sort of famous in his own right. He was a golf pro, but he was also like he was like a socialite. He was like a celebrity, and he had like an injury. He fell off a train, something. I think he tripped and fell getting off a train. And he went to a doctor who he thought was a doctor, and this doctor told him that he needed to drink Radithor because it would cure any kind of problems. It would invigorate him, it would give him energy. This doctor, I don't think I put his name down, but he was actually a Harvard dropout who just said he was a doctor, which is fantastic. This guy Byers, he bought into it and he became a spokesman for it. He said that it gave him the energy he needed. It helped his performance. He would go around and do talks about it, but eventually his health started to wane. So what radium does in the body specifically is that it kind of tricks your body into thinking that it's calcium. To the body, it looks very, very similar to calcium. And so, but it looks better. It looks like fancy calcium, right? So your body sees this radium coming into the body and it says, oh man, I had this calcium from like the milk and all the other sources, but this stuff is going to work so much better. So I'm going to throw out or block any of the calcium I have and replace it with this radium because it's so much cooler and it glows. Your body's really impressed. So unfortunately, when you replace all the calcium in your body with radium, it's just really not a good thing. So your calcium is leached out and replaced with this radium, and it deteriorates your bones. Now the radium girls went through that, and it was very, very terrible because the whole time they were suffering, the company they were working for was denying that any of it was a problem. And this guy probably had the same ideas from his doctor. What happened was he started losing his teeth. His jaw started deteriorating. By the time he died, he had his whole upper jaw was gone. Part of his lower jaw was gone. He had holes in his skull, and just about all of his bones in his whole body were disintegrating. And he's currently, I mean, he's dead, but he was buried and probably still is buried inside a lead-lined coffin, just like Marie Curie. And Marie Curie's notes are protected by lead because you can't even touch her notes. They're still radioactive today. So, and radium was big in other products too. A lot of companies took it on. There were several companies that had radioactive toothpaste. One of them was a German company, Doramad. The ad line was, "Your teeth will shine with radioactive brilliance." So of course people want shiny teeth, shiny big white teeth. Thoradia was the other one. It was a whole line of products that it had toothpaste, hair cream, and hemorrhoid cream. I'll say that again, hemorrhoid cream with radium. There was a jock strap in case you guys aren't uncomfortable enough. Just put some radium in your jock strap. And just like today, they had all of these like jewelry things. You know how you can buy those magnetic bracelets and the copper bracelets?
Yep.
It's the same kind of thing, but there was radium in them and uranium also. They would put them in like pendants, bracelets, watches, because they sort of touted them as being sources of energy. They said you would have like vigor and energy and everything would be great. Your whole flow of blood, and I'm sure these people who created this were still thinking we were in the four humors of medicine. Everything would just work out fine. So yeah, so that was radium. It's really bad.
Yeah, it is.
Radiation's still very good when it's used properly to treat cancers, but of course it can have, it can be dangerous for you. It can have side effects. It's pretty horrible. Marie Curie died from a form of cancer as a result of her exposure to radium. Her husband did not die of cancer because he was hit by a car or a horse and buggy. He was run over. So I mean, that's not funny, but I just think about like getting hit with a car. They did. I know this is going to be a tangent, but getting hit by a car is still a device that they use in so many movies now. Like it's just such a weird thing. Like you're just watching this movie and it's like a serious movie. And all of a sudden this huge truck just takes someone out. It's dramatic, but it's also like, I don't know, maybe I'm just super dark, but it's also kind of funny. Like, haha, it's just a huge bust. It just plows into you.
Yeah, I think they use it a lot of time as a shock device too. It's just like going by a dark corner and somebody jumps out, and it's sort of the same. It has the same effect. Yeah. All of a sudden, somebody's walking across the street and they get hit by a bus.
Well, and and it works because always whenever it happens, I'm like, whoa, geez. And then I rewind it because I was sort of zoning out. I mean, I think
Yeah.
they do that as a device to be like, are you guys paying attention? Are you still watching my show? Let's have a big boss hit someone. But anyway, so yeah, so that was Victorian inventions. There's thousands more. Maybe we can revisit this in a later episode. But what do you think so far of some of these products?
Oh, wonderful. Let's get them all. Bring
Let's
them
get
all
them all.
back. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to get that jock strap or do you want the hat, the tipping
I'll
hat?
do another heart. The hat. Yeah, get the hat. Yeah, I can start wearing a hat. Well, I wear a baseball cap, so maybe we can have one tied into a baseball cap. Actually, what I do now is just salute, so
You just salute.
yeah.
You have your baseball cap just tipping. I
Give a
mean,
quick salute. Yeah.
well, there's that thing that guys do to each other with the cap. You just like walk up to someone and just like flip their hat off of them really quick. Maybe you could have an anti-flipping your hat device so somebody can't come and do that to you.
I always joke about people that you ever see folks that have their hat on, baseball cap, particularly, cocked to the side a little bit.
Yeah.
And I always think like it's somebody just slapped them upside the head. And
Yeah, they
that's
just
where the cap stopped.
haven't fixed it yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or the meme that it's very funny. But the kid who has his hat on backwards, to be cool.
Oh, yeah.
But then he's using his hands to like shield him from the sun.
Yep. Yeah, I see that a lot. Yep, exactly.
Like if only there was some sort of alternate solution to shield me from the sun besides using my hand.
But if you're gonna have a cap and you got to put it on backwards, why wear a cap at all?
Well, I guess his neck is fine.
Yeah.
The back of his neck is fine.
Yeah.
All right. So getting more into sort of modern times, famous flops,
Oh,
products
yeah.
that maybe made it briefly, didn't quite make it, thought they were going to be the next best thing. Somebody was like, oh my God, this is brilliant. Why hasn't anybody thought of this before? We got a huge list of them. Do you want to do
I'll do a couple.
some of them? Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Well, everybody's familiar with McDonald's, and you may have one time or another seen these products that did have it seems to me it would have been a veggie craze at
Mhm.
this, when this came up, but they had the hula burger.
yes.
And basically, the hula burger was a slice of pineapple with cheese on it
Mhm.
on a hamburger bun.
Yeah.
So basically, it's a vegetarian.
Well, did you read
burger.
about why Ray Kroc thought that was going to be a good idea? Why he came up with it?
You know what? I don't know that I did.
Okay. It's really funny because his second idea was better. He just didn't get there yet. So he was concerned. He owned a burger place, right? Okay. And what do you have at a burger place? You have meat.
Mhm.
He was concerned because a large part of the country was observing the no meat on Fridays thing, right? And he was like, well, they're not going to come to McDonald's on
Meat.
Fridays, right? Because they can't have meat on Fridays. What am I going to do? I need to come up with a meat alternative for these people so that they will come on Fridays. So that's why he came up with the hula burger. But here's the thing, like his second idea, when the hula burger failed,
Mhm.
because it was like, that's kind of weird. Hey, listen, pineapple on a burger is good with the burger. Like you used to
Yep.
make those ham ones. They were spectacular.
Yep.
But like just pineapple on a burger with cheese is pretty weird. He could have just asked anybody who eats no meat on Fridays what they eat when they're not eating the meat on Fridays. It was fish.
That's right, exactly, and that's what the fillet of fish.
Right. He came
And-
out with that second when the hula burger failed. It's like, come on, dude. Everybody eats fish on Fridays. It was called Fish on Fridays.
Well, funny thing is that was I always liked the fillet of fish sandwich.
It doesn't need to have cheese on it, though. It's weird. I
No,
like
no.
tartar sauce, but
Yeah.
I don't know why he put a half a piece of cheese on it.
And the fillet of fish, it sort of leads up to the next one, which was the McLobster.
Yeah.
It was like a heap of lobster and lettuce on a bun with lots of sauce. Just the lettuce often was larger, outweighed the lobster,
Of
and
course.
many people were not willing to pay almost $6 for it.
Although the lobster rolls were really popular.
Lobster rolls are popular, but they're not like the McLobster. It's different. It's like a lobster roll it's on like a hot dog roll. But it's still available in Canada and parts of New England.
Yeah, we had them and we sold out really early. Like we had to make those like first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
And you made like a ton of them and they were always sold out like before halfway through lunch. It was everybody loved those friggin' things. I don't like lobster, but I'm a fake New Englander. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. And we're going to concentrate a little bit on McDonald's. They had another one called the McDLT, which is basically, there's really nothing wrong with it. It's just a burger with lettuce, tomato, cheese, and pickles. Personally, and this is my opinion, I don't care for the pickles. That's just my opinion. But the problem was the packaging wasn't so much the thing, it was the burger, but it was packaged in a styrofoam container with separate compartments. One had the lettuce, tomato, and pickles, and the meat and the bun were on the other.
Yeah.
I guess the idea was to try to keep it warm.
Yeah, exactly. That was their marketing. Like the commercial would be like, keeps the hot side hot and the cold side cold.
Yeah.
So that when you had your burger, it was like fresher. It tasted fresher. So it wasn't all like weird.
Yeah. And I think that there was also, the push that probably hurt this is this styrofoam, which is, far from a green type product and basically pulled from the market. This last one is kind of bizarre, I guess is the best way to describe it. It was called McGrotten Croquet. Basically, it's really mostly targeted the Japanese market, but it was a combined macaroni, mashed potatoes, and shrimp in a deep fried croquet-like patty.
Yep.
Patty was put on a bun with a bit of cabbage, and unsurprisingly, I guess people didn't like it.
It's funny because there's a lot of international McDonald's that still have croquettes, like croquets, because they're good, but they're just not shrimp and macaroni and mashed potatoes.
Right.
They really do love those like breaded yumminess with the potato. The McPizza was another one.
Yeah. They do come up with they're always trying something different, and
the McPizza is still available in Miami, I think. Or in Orlando. There's one in Orlando that has pizza. There was McSpaghetti. Before they came up with the chicken nuggets in the 80s, in the 70s, they tried to make onion nuggets, which honestly I would have eaten because it's probably like onion rings, but the onion is chopped up. So it's probably like the Burger King onion rings. It probably would have been pretty good.
That's been pretty good, yeah.
And then there was one that they had the Arch Deluxe, which was like, it had seaweed in the burger so that it was like the burger was much leaner. And then they had the McLean Deluxe, which was a whole other thing. Oh, yeah, actually, no, that's the McLean Deluxe. The Arch Deluxe, I can't remember what that was. But so they had the mixed salad shakers, which were like salad in a cup, which by the way is very popular again. I actually loved them because it was like a smaller salad and you put the dressing in and then you shake it up. It was fine. I don't know why it flopped. I thought it was actually pretty good. But whatever, who am I? So yeah, McDonald's tried a lot of things. There's a lot of stuff that's in other countries, which is good. We could probably do an episode on that. I don't know if we would get in trouble from McDonald's for doing a whole episode of McDonald's stuff, but there you go.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure about getting in trouble with it. It was more to try to emphasize, sort of things that didn't hit the way they thought they were going to hit,
Yeah. Well, and I think McDonald's was, Ray Kroc was like nervous because, he took the business from the McDonald brothers, but he franchised it when there weren't a lot of restaurant franchises and he made it very fast. He had the efficient sort of the way that things were made that worked really well. But what happened was there were a lot of imitators there were a lot of burger places that started popping up after McDonald's got popular. And I think he was worried that he would fade into the background and just be, instead of being the one who started it, be like just another burger place. So I think that's why he tried to come up with so many different things over the years.
I also think it's kind of like a discussion you and I had fairly recently about what happens with corporations. Is that when you have the initial growth period and your profits soar through the roof, what inevitably happens is if you're successful enough as the market gets saturated. So all of a sudden your profit margin goes from, let's say for the sake of argument, 75, 50% goes down to like 25%, which is huge for
Right.
companies.
Right.
So they say, hey, we got to find the next best thing to launch us back into our 50 or 75% profit margin.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where businesses go from. And that I'm sure that it was like that, or you get more competition for him and people were competing, offering the same product, cutting into his margin. And even if there wasn't competition, there still would be a saturation to the market.
Right.
And so they just have to come up with different things. And it's always this way in corporations. Is first thing they try to do is find ways to put out new products. And when that doesn't work, then they start cutting what they offer.
Right. It kind of gets sad after a while. There's a podcast that I listen to, my brother and me, and they have a segment on there called Munch Squad. It's very funny. But in that segment, they read press releases from basically fast food companies on their latest new promotions. And some of them are pretty basic. They come out with this new flavor or whatever. But most of them just get real. It's kind of sad after a while because they're just trying everything. They're just trying to throw everything at the wall to see what sticks. And, coming up with just bizarre. It's like you see like Taco Bell is doing this with like, just put Cheetos in it. Just put Doritos in it. Just something. Just make it. It's just tacos, man. Just make tacos.
Yeah, I know. There's an engineering rule is that when you're faced with a problem, the best solution is change one thing at a time.
Right.
And when you change multiple things and then your overall project changed, you don't know which thing it was that corrected that.
Well, yeah.
That issue. On the positive side, from what McDonald's approached and with a lot of other companies approach, is they do the one thing at a time. They try one new product and see what happens with it. And that's really the most logical way.
Yeah. Well, and I think McDonald's had a little bit of an advantage to be able to try and come up with things like that because they offered multiple products in their restaurant, right?
Yep.
But another company that took that kind of a risk had a big problem on their hands because they really only offered one or two things, and that was Coca-Cola. I don't, you and I remember New Coke. It was an enormous flop because they were like, you know what? We're like the number one soda. Let's change it completely. Because I think they were finding that they weren't getting any attention anymore. And they were like, well, what's going to happen? We're slipping. This Pepsi thing is coming. Why don't we just change our formula altogether? And that'll be exciting and new. And everybody will be just as invigorated as they were when we invented Coca-Cola in the first place. And it's like, no, actually, we aren't going to accept that. And it absolutely flopped big time. And then they came out with Coke Classic as a response. Now, there are some people who think that the whole thing was on purpose, that Coca-Cola wanted to create a splash. And so they knew that if they changed their formula, people wouldn't be happy. So they thought, let's change the formula, get everybody pissed off, get everybody upset that the old formula is gone, and then bring back the old formula. It'll be brilliant. And that worked. But then some people working for Coca-Cola who deny that was ever the case. And then there's some people who say, yeah, that's absolutely what they did.
Yeah.
But Coca-Cola denies there was ever cocaine in their Coca-Cola. So we can't really rely on what they say.
It's back to the usual thing I said about what happens. There's a saturation to the market. There's no growth or whatever, or not the kind of growth they're used to. And they have to try to do something. And that's pretty good. It's almost like a bait and switch. So.
Right. The next one on my list is the same thing because it was the Ford Motor Company came out with the Edsel.
Yeah.
Which now, why exactly did the Edsel fail? Is it just because it was ugly, or what was I mean, it is an ugly car, but like, what was the problem?
You know, that's an interesting question. The Edsel, it might have been in a case where people were just used to certain things in terms of a product. You know,
Hmm.
that was the time when post World War II, actually post Korean War, and people were very conservative in their thinking,
Hmm.
and didn't want anything new. And the Edsel was a different concept. When you look at the Edsel, and personally from my standpoint, I looked at it and I said, Jesus, I don't know why it failed. It just wasn't accepted.
Yeah, because it was just like it was a big, weird looking car, just like all the big, weird looking cars. The way I see it from my eyes, I wasn't alive, but
Yeah, and that's it. That was really the issue. People didn't like the look of it. They were
well, the
used
grill is a
to,
bit strange.
yeah, and it was at a point where now it's a lot different, but they market cars a lot differently than they did back then, and people would keep their cars for a long time,
Right.
and they just weren't prepared to do new cars. It's like you even see it in some of the folks when you, maybe not so much in the current generations, but the previous generations, they didn't care much for changes.
Right.
Uh,
They went
and
with what worked.
yeah, they went with what's worked. And the mindset was that anything new doesn't have enough history behind it
Right.
to be reliable.
Well, that happened with Saturn. Remember when Saturn first came out?
Mhm.
Everybody was like, "Oh, wow, it's brand new car company." And then like the first couple of years, there were so many problems with the cars. People didn't want Saturns for a while.
Yeah, you could argue that that mindset is still there, and I find myself sometimes thinking about that when I see all the new gadgets and stuff that go into cars, and I could just imagine. Actually, I think of my father. He said, "No, no, that thing's going to break."
Yeah, that's the first
And
thing
this,
that's going to break. Yeah.
yeah, it's like a Huffy bicycle or something like that. Oh, that thing's nice and solid. It's never going to break.
Hmm.
But now, hey, they're offering this, aluminum wheeled, fiberglass bike,
Yeah,
with all
carbon
these
fiber.
bells and
Yeah.
whistles, and yeah, but it's gonna break. So that's, I think that was kind of what went on with the Edsel, which is a
Right.
little unfortunate, at least from the Edsel standpoint. And you're right, it probably had bugs. And I think they had some manufacturing of the Edsel in, I'd have to be corrected on this if I'm wrong. There was a Ford plant over in Medford, Massachusetts. Yeah, I think it was Medford. And I think they manufactured some of the models there.
That's funny. Yeah. So it became kind of a joke, of course.
Yep, it did.
Um, so another big one that was there, I'm jumping around a little bit on my list, was Betamax
Hmm.
versus
Yep.
VHS. Um, Betamax was better as far as the technology, correct? But it just something
Hmm.
happened. It just wasn't. Was it because it was more expensive, or was it just because I'm not sure why? I mean, because Betamax, the actual machines and the tapes worked better, but because they didn't catch on in the market, maybe they didn't have enough titles or whatever.
Yeah. Well, if you think about when PCs started first coming out, and Apple came out with the PC, and then Microsoft came out with software to go with the PCs, there were more options. And I think with Betamax, there just wasn't a lot of options. And
Right.
what's interesting about Betamax, and I think about the word beta, anytime you hear something new, it's they're using the beta
Yeah,
at
never
first.
alpha, never alpha.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
always
It's always
beta.
beta.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I find that interesting too. I'm
yeah,
sure there's a reason behind it,
yeah.
but yeah, the Betamax was, it was videotapes, and they came out kind of around the same time as like the VHS. And again, the technology was better, the actual product was better, but I think for whatever reason, and I'm sure people have analyzed the reason, um there weren't enough movie titles that you could buy on Betamax, and it was very expensive, that a lot of people, I think including you, returned your Betamax players and bought the VHS ones because you could actually get movies for it. I mean, isn't that why you have the player in the first place?
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting because Betamax had a lot of advantages over VHS. Um, Higher horizontal resolution, lower video noise than VHS,
Right.
fast forward more quickly than VHS. Tape sizes were smaller than VHS.
Yep. I remember they were smaller.
Capacity, recording capacity was higher.
Yeah.
But for some reason, ultimately VHS became the standard format.
It's because they didn't have Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock,
There you go.
which I believe was the first movie that you bought on VHS.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of times, it becomes maybe it was and I don't know for sure, but maybe it was a manufacturing, maybe it was easier or cheaper to manufacture the VHS rather than the Betamax.
That's possible because there was probably a lot less material in them. They felt very, it was just a cassette tape. It's just a hollow thing with some tape inside,
Yeah,
you know?
I think it'd be like, to me, it always comes down to, and it's this discussion we've had just recently about this. It comes down to something that's more expensive to produce.
Right.
And when you have something that's less costly to produce,
Hmm.
and the differences for most people are negligible, then they go with the less expensive product.
That makes
And
sense.
yeah, it's like having a higher quality stereo versus a lower quality stereo. For the most part, most of us can't tell the difference.
Right.
I think that's the bottom line to it.
Hmm.
Betamax was superior, but
Yeah.
like anything else is.
Well, and then similarly, with the laser discs, I remember when laser discs came out, it was a big thing. A laser disc, when they came out, was the size of a record album.
Yep.
And it was kind of like an 8-track in that the whole thing was encased in like the plastic shell.
Yep.
And it was that big. The problem was, I mean, the disc technology, like the digital disc technology wasn't there yet. We didn't have, that was way before CDs and DVDs. So you had to buy this enormous thing with a movie on it, and you had to turn it over halfway.
Mm.
And they
Yeah.
were really expensive too. I think your brother had one, but we never got a laser disc player.
No, and I think we've all seen how things progress, and the reason they progress, not always for the best reasons, but the reason they progress is cost, and ease of manufacture and advancement in manufacturing. I mean, you think about it now, you can't see some stores, commercial stores are not offering CDs or DVDs or CDs in particular.
Right.
Because now you can, get everything electronically.
You can just stream it. I know the DVDs and the Blu-rays are going to be fading, but I still
Yep.
like having them, because you cannot stream everything. As it turns out, we want to watch older stuff sometimes,
Yeah.
and it popped into our heads because we were thinking about all the stuff we used to watch when we were kids, and we wanted to watch the movie Johnny Dangerously.
Mm.
Maybe Michael Keaton was on the brain. Went on Amazon. You want to buy a DVD of Johnny Dangerously? It's $50.
Mm.
And you can only stream it on HBO Max. So like that would have been a good reason to have that on DVD years ago when nobody cared about streaming.
Yeah.
But now if I want to watch Johnny Dangerously, I have to like either pirate it or watch it, or get HBO Plus for like a month. It's not that important.
No, it's not.
Right. Some other products that kind of flopped. This one I always go back to whenever I think about this subject because it's just really weird. So they had this line of sodas specifically marketed to pets, and it was called Thirsty Dog and Thirsty Cat. And they were like a 2-liter bottle of soda with flavors for dogs and cats. And two of the examples for the dogs, it was crispy beef, and it was like crispy with a bunch of R's, and also tangy fish for the cats. None of the animals liked it. Like no animals just didn't like it at all. So they just flopped completely. Like they didn't even market test it first. Like, does your cat need soda? Like, I have the monthly cat nip box that I get. It's like a little monthly
Yeah.
subscription, and it has cat toys in it. And it's actually perfect for us because the cat toys are they're not low quality, but they're low
Yeah.
enough quality that you don't feel bad about throwing them away after they get all gross with spit and cat stuff and just getting dragged around the room for a month and a half. But they also include treats. And they don't do this anymore, but they used to include this little bottle of like, it was called like champagne for cats.
Hmm.
And it had like catnip in it. And we put it in a little bowl, and none of the cats were interested. And one of them even tried to bury it. They were like, I don't think so. Like, who thinks that a cat wants this stuff? They had like the catnip bubbles that you could blow. Because you remember our dog Bingo loved when we blew bubbles. He would chase them and like bite them out of the
Oh
air and
yeah.
stuff.
Yep.
I was like,
Yep.
oh wow, cats love chasing after things. That would be so great. So we bought the cat bubbles. None of them were interested. And two of them were scared. So it didn't work.
That sort of segues me
Yeah.
into ideas that worked. And one idea that worked that's really has to do with pets. Dogs, they're great, but they have one particular bad features. They don't pick up after themselves.
No, they really don't.
Yeah, and over in Spain, there was a big problem with it, which seems to be everywhere with people not picking up. So this firm concocted a plan, a nudge, to send the poop back to the owners. The idea was dreamed out. It works this way. The volunteer chats up a non-scooping owner and finds out the canine's name. After the dog walker and the pooch would leave, the volunteer gets the owner's name and address, puts it in the database, gets the dog's name and breed, puts it in the database. He scoops up the poop, places in a package, marks it lost property, and messages it to the owner. And the funny thing about this, during the campaign, it actually worked. They delivered 147 times, resulting in, but what resulted was a 70% decline in the amount of dog droppings littering the streets.
I mean, that's okay. But here's the thing. Okay, it would never work here because first of all, nobody likes being doxxed. Nobody likes somebody like, oh yeah, what's your name and address? Like,
yep. No, you wouldn't do that. Yeah, right.
No,
yeah.
you wouldn't do that. I wonder if they tried what we do here and just have the bags just on a little pole in the park, like for free.
Yeah, I mean, that would maybe ultimately they did that. Here's one that you kind of, it's a bad idea. It's called relation strike.
Okay.
This small Colombian village, it was just isolated, 35-mile track to the next town. The roads, they weren't fixing them. And then, finally, one of the young women and her unborn child died in an ambulance after it got stuck on the road. They couldn't reach the hospital in time.
Right.
So the women revolted. They hit the streets and they did a mass protest. And they dubbed that mass protest the Cross Legs Movement.
Oh boy.
In short, there would be no loving until the road was repaired.
Oh, so they're basically like bad girlfriends. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the town's mayor even was affected by this. So it worked. The strike was called off in October as bulldozers and heavy machinery began repairs. So it cut the travel time to the nearest town by 2 hours. This is one I personally like and I can understand, is that, surprise, more people don't do this. In Portland, Oregon, there was a train station that a lot of young men used to hang out at. And they tried to disperse the crowds. They couldn't do it. So they talked to youths and they talked to them and said, hey, what bothers you? And, that kind of thing.
Right.
Like what kind of music you like, what don't you like? So they didn't like opera or classical work, music. So they blared it over the music station speaker during a pilot program. It worked. There was a drop in the 18 to 25-year-old loitering.
Like loitering,
Once the fat lady sung. In one instance, a young guy stormed out of the station just as Bizet's Carmen proclaimed her love for he who does not love her.
That's so funny. They still do that though. And then they do that with terrorists. Didn't they do that? Didn't they do that in Texas with the standoff?
Yeah.
Didn't they blare like the heavy metal music at them?
Heavy metal music. And this is
Waco.
Yeah. And the British Royal Navy would blare Britney Spears music at Somali pirates. They couldn't stand the Western music. And as soon as they got a blast of Britney, they move on as fast as they could.
So the Somali pirates don't like Britney. Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
Do they like Taylor Swift?
Who knows? Maybe they haven't tried that yet. Maybe
I
they
can't.
will. Maybe this is that could be dated. You know,
Yeah. Yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah. Oh my God. So that's actually a really good idea. The rest of this, we could do a little quick rundown of some more bad ideas, but there was one more big one. And I might actually do a partial episode on this because this one is awesome. So Atari was big. We had an Atari player,
Mhm.
and also the movie E.T. was big in the 80s. I mean, that was one of the first movies that you took me to. And of course, Spielberg was big on marketing. And so they came out with an Atari, like an ET Atari game.
Mhm.
And it sucked so bad.
Mhm.
It was like they thought it was going to be huge. So they made 4 million copies of it. But I played that game once and it's terrible. Like you can't do anything. It's like the Superman Atari game. Like
Oh, yeah.
you couldn't even navigate. Like it wouldn't explain to you what was going on. If anybody has seen Atari games, they're just blobs basically. So you have this little ET guy and he's in like a cave, and then you go to the next screen and it's another cave, and then you fall down a pit for some reason and you can't do anything. It was terrible. So they sold 1.5 million, which is surprising they sold that many. Or yeah, that's how many they sold. So they took the rest of them. They didn't even put them in like discount bins. They took the rest of them and they threw them in a hole in the ground in the desert and just buried them, which is
Uh,
fantastic, which
yeah.
is what they should do with most of these products. Also, Colgate, the toothpaste company,
Mhm.
tried to come out with a line of frozen dinners at a time when frozen dinners were at their peak. They had lean cuisine and all of that good stuff coming out. So Colgate was like, I know what we'll do. We'll have frozen dinners. And the packaging is very good looking, but it says Colgate in big, huge letters. And people they don't want to associate, they don't want to eat it because it's associated with toothpaste.
That's right. Yeah.
So they had like Colgate lasagna. It just completely tanked. Portable record players. It was like this little thing that was about the size of a cell phone,
Yep.
and you put your record on it. But like if you can't take a record player with you, like what, in the car, it's gonna skip.
Yep.
Like, but okay. So this last part is mostly toys. These ones are very funny. We're gonna start with two dolls, and the short-sightedness of the companies is really what gets me here. So the first doll has a little more of a backstory. Most of the people that I talked to about this didn't actually know what the show was, which makes me sad. But there was this show, kids, called All in the Family. The main character was Archie Bunker, and he was a very conservative, sort of everything used to be better in the old days kind of guy who was bigoted and kind of misogynistic, but in a lovable way, I guess. I don't know. I love Archie Bunker. The point of the show was that you're supposed to laugh at how ridiculous he was being so conservative nowadays, right? And nowadays
Mhm.
being the 70s. And just like in Family Ties, he was blessed with a child who ended up with the opposite views of him, right? So like Alex P.
Mhm.
Keaton from Family Ties was a conservative when his parents were hippies. So it was like the opposite here, where his daughter Gloria married like a pinko communist Marxist hippie,
Mhm.
affectionately called Meathead. And it was like, it was a sitcom. It was a popular show. Everybody loved that show. Everybody watched that show. And so when Gloria and Meathead had a baby, it was big news. They had a baby. And because the show was so big, they marketed products for the show. Used to have like lunch boxes and stuff. And they had a baby doll. Now, in the 70s and 80s, all of us had baby dolls, all of us that were girls. But most of our baby dolls were girl dolls because that's just what they thought girls just wanted. They were all just going to have girls. When they grew up to become mommies. Joey was the baby on All in the Family, and Joey was a boy. They decided they wanted to make one of those dolls that you could give water to and it would wet the diapers. And so they decided to also make it anatomically correct, this little boy baby doll, which is like, there's really nothing wrong with that, depending on what kind of parent you are. But
Yep.
in this time, the parents weren't super cool with that. Especially considering that most baby dolls, and I'm sure you can attest, end up naked most of the time anyways.
Yep.
So, and what you do with a baby doll when you're a little kid is you dress it and undress it. And because it was the doll that you fed water to, you changed its diaper all the time. And a lot of these parents were not comfortable with their little 6-year-olds knowing as much as they didn't want them to know at that time in their lives, I guess. So that was the Joey Stivic doll. And now this doll is worth a lot of money. I actually had an opportunity to buy one once and I just didn't have 50 bucks on me. So I left. It was at a flea market. I went back to that same flea market 3 years later and I said, "Hey, do you still have that Joey Stivic doll?" He was like, "Yeah, I'll sell it to you for 200 bucks." I was like, "Damn it. Damn it." The other doll that didn't quite hit the mark for similar reasons, it was a Christian company and they were marketing a baby Jesus doll, which again, nothing wrong with that. You wanted to have your little kids learn about the miracles of the baby Jesus and the birth and everything like that. And the baby Jesus doll came with like his little crib and it probably had like a little manger and stuff, little animals or whatever, but it was a baby doll, like the size of other baby dolls. And the problem with this doll was, it was marketed to Christian families. And a lot of Christian families at this time were, they were quite conservative as well. It was a little disturbing to these parents how this baby doll would end up in the end, because the other reality about little kids and their toys, when you first get a toy, it's a new toy and you play with it as intended for about 10 minutes. Especially like a baby doll. You got a little doll, it's got its little clothes. You put it in a little carriage or you like rock it like a baby and you feed it. But eventually, like, kids are animals. They take their doll and they're just like dragging it up the stairs by its foot, and they take all its clothes off and they write on it with markers and they cut all its hair off. And that's what kids do with their dolls, So these parents were a little disturbed that like the baby Jesus was being dragged up and down stairs by its foot, being, thrown. Maybe the dog came and picked it up and and they were thinking maybe it wasn't so good for the baby Jesus. So it did not go far. There was another doll, one last doll. It was called the Snack Time Cabbage Patch doll. I don't know if you ever saw, did you ever see that doll? I know you saw the Cabbage Patch Kids, but so this was like a later version of the Cabbage Patch Kid where it was interactive. It wasn't just like you put water in it and it peed. It was like it had this little plastic food that you fed it. And it was like little French fries and little vegetables. And if you put it near the mouth would start like going chomp, 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 chomp. And it was really fun because it ate the food and then like the food would come out another end probably. The problem with that was that little kids don't, like I said before, they don't play with the toys as the marketers intend.
No, they don't.
It's like they put peanut butter and jelly sandwiches in the VCR, like that's how kids play with things. So yeah, they put the little French fry in the doll's mouth the first 2 times. But then the third time they put, their little brother's finger in the Cabbage Patch Kid's mouth. And they also put their own hair, either accidentally or on purpose, into the Cabbage Patch Kid's mouth. And so when enough little girls and little boys got their fingers mangled and their hair pulled out, they decided to go ahead and not make it anymore.
Discontinued. Yeah.
Discontinued. On that same line, lawn darts, which we didn't have, but Sue had. Yeah, because I remember, those first times that you guys were dating and she had all that land. I played lawn darts with like Stacy and they were these huge darts that you threw across the yard and they were like sharp. It was like a javelin and
a spike in it. Yeah.
A big spike and it sticks into the ground. You're supposed to be on one end and you throw it like a horseshoe at the target on the other end.
Right.
But again, that is not how children play with things.
Nope.
You will throw it at the neighbor kids and try to kill your neighbors. So that wasn't good. Also dangerous toy, the Gilbert U-238 Atomic Energy Lab. So I had a chemistry set when I was a kid. I also had an electronic lab when I was a kid, which you could put little wires on and it made little sounds. This one was kind of like a chemistry set, but it had radioactive materials.
Oh, great. Yeah.
They had little samples of like uranium and plutonium in it. And they had like a little Geiger counter and you could like, oh, look, it makes the little crackly noise when you do the Geiger counter. And they literally sold that to children. It had little pieces of uranium in it, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And then one more, the CSI fingerprint examination kit. So CSI, I'm sure this, I don't know, I didn't note the year that this product came out, but it must have been kind of later, right? Because of CSI.
Mhm.
It was a little examination kit that you could learn how to like take fingerprints, which if you know how to do fingerprints, you use powder, right?
Right.
This powder was at least 7% asbestos.
Good job.
Good job. The last couple of failures that I have on my list, wow chips with Olestra. I don't know if any of us remember that. Olestra was a fat that they had manufactured in a lab, and it was considered revolutionary when it first came out because it was a fat that you could put in foods that your body would not absorb. It would just go right through you. So they thought, what a great idea. You could eat as much fat as you want and never gain any weight. Well, if you eat a bunch of fat and it's going to go right through you, there's a way that it goes right through you.
Yes, let's not go there.
And you really can't eat as much as you want because otherwise you are in a lot of pain and discomfort and embarrassment. So
Yep.
that was bad. They stuck around for a little while though. People just and that Olestra is still used today in manufacturing, and also there is a diet product that's still on the market that uses it, but it's the same thing. They tell you to be very careful about what you eat while you're on this, because I mean the idea behind this fat is not so that you can eat as much as you want. The idea behind this fat is it's supposed to scare you into not eating very much. So it's kind of bad. It's kind of terrible. I hate it. And then slightly lighter, Coors tried to come out with a sparkling water. It was called Coors Rocky Mountain Sparkling Water. And there's really nothing wrong with having a sparkling water for your product. I mean, a beer company has an awful lot of water that they use. And Coors in particular, very proud of their water because they talk about the mountain taste of the mountains or whatever they say. The problem with that is their packaging looks exactly like their beer bottles. So, and I was talking to somebody at work about this, just kind of mentioning it, and they were like, they thought of something I didn't think of, which is like, yeah, okay, so you're gonna drink this while you're driving in the car. It's gonna look like
so.
it's gonna look like you're driving down the street drinking a beer because it says Coors right on it. Like, no, I don't think so. So yeah. So that's just a few. There's more, of course, but I think we killed it.
Yeah, I think so.
I think we did it. I think we did a job on that. So maybe write in and tell us your favorite failed products, because there's a lot of them. Failed inventions, failed products, weird stuff that people thought was a good idea. Definitely was not. You can send us an email about that at mochiverse@gmail.com, MOCCIAVERSE@gmail.com. While you're on the internet, you can rate us, give us like 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, please. Or any other, you can go on Spotify, send us a message on either YouTube or if you just follow our link on Buzzsprout, send us a little message and just let us know you're out there, and then tell everybody you know how fun our podcast is and how much you love listening to us and how much you've learned. You didn't even have to go to school and you got educated. So there you have it. So my cats are hissing because I think they know. I think they know what's coming next. Some dad jokes.
There we go.
Okay.
What computer is a singer?
What?
Adele.
Ah.
Yep. Hey, my boss wished me to have a good day.
Uh-huh.
So I went home.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah. And why do nurses use red crayons?
Why?
They have to draw a lot of blood.
Oh, that's good. I like that.
Yeah.
I have a nurse one, but I'll tell it later.
Did you hear the joke about deja vu? Did you hear the joke about deja vu? Okay, what's brown and sticky?
A stick.
There you go.
I knew that one.
Yeah. What game are tornadoes best at? Twister.
What? Ah.
But I don't have too many today, so
That's okay. That's okay. We have things to do, places to be.
Yep. People to see.
Right. People to see. All right, folks. Well, that was our show. And I guess we'll see you again in a couple of weeks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Daddy wasn't finding a pow wow. Daddy wasn't finding a pow wow.
Sue?
Yeah, I know.
You just want she's reminding you about your appointment. We're
Yeah,
almost
well, I'm
done.
gonna have some lunch before I go. So,
Oh,
so,
geez. Okay. All right.
all right.
Okay.